So when it asks you to determine if a relation is a function, it's going to be helpful to think of it like it's a machine that has buttons, because that's really what a function is it's really like a machine where you're putting like something into it or giving it a signal and you're expecting it to do something for you, okay? And so when it asks you this type of question, it is helpful to think of it like a machine. And so one machine that I thought of is, what if it was a vending machine, okay? Because a vending machine has buttons that you press. And so to figure out if it is a function, you're going to think, is the machine functioning correctly, okay? So if you think of a vending machine, okay, and I just came up with a general vending machine kind of idea. So you've got, in this vending machine, you've got cola, and a lot of times vending machines will have two buttons that'll give you the same thing. And then let's say it's got water and diet cola, and then two different types of juices you can get. All right, so you've got orange juice and apple juice. So if you were at this vending machine and you wanted a drink, let's say that you wanted a cola, okay? So I've got these the buttons numbered, okay? So for instance, if you press button number 1, what would you expect to get out of it? Well, if I press this button right here and I put my money in, I'm expecting to get a cola out of it, okay? So if I do that and I get my cola, then it's working properly, okay? If I, for instance, press button number 3 because I want a water, then I'm expecting to get my water out of it, okay? If I'm really thirsty that day and I want more water, if I press button number 3 again, and I've put my money and everything in it, then I'm expecting to get a water. So if that's happening, then it's functioning correctly, okay? Because if you press the same button, you're expecting to get the same thing out of it, all right? And so, well, what would mean that it's not functioning correctly? Well, if you, for instance, press button number 3 again, and for instance, you end up getting a cola out of it, that's a problem, okay? So if this happens and you're pressing that same button, in other words, you're putting in the same signal to the machine, hey, I'm pressing button number 3, you're expecting to get the same thing out of it. When you do not get the same thing out of it, like for instance with this example right there, that means your machine is not working properly, and so that would not be functioning correctly, and so it wouldn't be a function, okay? And so when you look at these problems, you're gonna think of it the same way, okay? So your X values are what you're putting into the machine, the signal that you're telling the machine. So the buttons in this case are my X values. So the buttons that I'm pressing are my X values. And then what you're expecting to get out of it, in this case, the different types of drinks I could get, those are your Y values. So these would be like the drinks are what are called your outputs, what you get out of it. And these are your Y values, your outputs, all right? So the only reason you should be concerned with if something's a function or not is if they have repeatedly pressed the same button, okay? That's gonna be the thing that throws up that red flag, all right? So when you're looking at these problems over here, this is called a mapping, okay? And these numbers over here are your X values. So these are like the buttons that you're pressing. And then these in this little, I guess, circle or oval to the right are your Y values. These are what you get out of it, okay? So these are your buttons or your inputs, the signal that you're giving the machine. These are your outputs, what you get out of it, all right? So again, the only reason you should be concerned is if they've pressed the same button more than once, okay? So the way that you read this is they're gonna have a number on this side, so like they have a 1, and it's gonna have an arrow to what you get out of it. So when they press button number 1, so you can rewrite it kind of like my coordinates that I wrote over there. When I press button number 1, I end up getting a -1 out of it, okay? The only reason I would be concerned is if they press button number 1 again. And notice there's no other arrows coming from 1, so I can keep going, all right? So when they pressed button number 3, I got a 4 out of it, and they didn't press button number 3 again because there's no other arrows coming from it. When they pressed button number 5, they got a 4 out of it. And so this example, remember, would be kind of like you have 2 different buttons that give you the same thing. Because over here, notice when I press button number 1, I would get a COLA if it's functioning correctly. If I press button number 2, I would get the same thing. So that's kind of like 2 different buttons that give you the same output. That is okay, okay? So, and then we're going to keep going. So then when I press button number 7, I got a 6. And so because there wasn't any buttons that I pressed more than once, there isn't really a reason to be concerned. So you can say that this relation is a function, because as far as you know, it is a correctly working machine because no red flags came about, okay? So then we keep going. So this one, when I pressed button number 3, I got a -2 out of it. When I pressed button number 1, let's see, it goes to the 0, so I got a 0 out of it, and then I didn't press button number 1 again. When I pressed button number 0, I got a -1. When I pressed, I pressed 0 again. So because I pressed 0 again, I'm expecting to get the same thing out. If I do not, then that means it's not working correctly, which means it's not a function, okay? So this one, when I pressed 0 again, I actually got a different number. And so because of that, because it's giving me 2 different outputs, that means that this one's not correctly working, so you would say it's not a function. All right, so that's what you look for, is you look for the ones where they've pressed the same button twice. They have the same X value, but it's giving you different Y values, all right? So keep going. So now they just have the coordinates laid out for you. So all you have to do when they have the actual coordinates kind of set out for you is look for a situation like this where they have repeated X values. So if I look, my X value here is 4. I'm gonna look, is there another 4 as an X value? No. My X value here is -2. There's not another -2. The X value here is 0. Not another 0, and then we got 1. So because they didn't have the same X value kind of pressed again, or the same button pressed, you can just say that this one, as far as we know, is functioning properly, so it is a function. All right, last one. So we're gonna just quickly scan our X values, and we're gonna see, is there a repeated X value? And if you look, you've got an X value of 1 here, and what we got out of it was a 1. Here, when we pressed it again, we did not get the same thing out of it. So that throws up my red flag. So because we did not get the same output when we pressed the 1 button, you could say that this is not working correctly. So you would say this is not a function, okay? So think of it like a vending machine and buttons and what you get out of it.